Discover how $75 transformed a worthless ranch into an incredible lifeline for a starving horse. Jake stood in the sweltering heat, sweat pooling at his brow as he stared across the overgrown fields. The ranch, once a vibrant landscape alive with laughter and purpose, had become a haunting reminder of dreams slipping through his fingers. After losing his job in town, the burden of debt felt like a weight pressing down on him, robbing him of breath. He recalled the stories his grandfather told about the land, the legacy that molded him into the man he was. What had it become? A tangle of despair and weeds. Would selling it mean failing his family? Despite every optimistic thought, doubt gnawed at his insides. With each step deeper into the back fields, Jake could feel his heart beat faster, the weeds nearly wrapping around him as if trying to drag him down with them. A sense of self-worth, once deeply instilled from years of hard work and family pride, faded after each bill he couldn't pay. How had a ranch once built on legacy turned into a financial noose? He coughed out a dry breath, instinctively questioning how long he could hold on. Was it time to let go? Then he saw it, a decrepit barn jutting out against the horizon, almost camouflaged by the rampant grass. As he approached, an unsettling feeling sank deeper into his gut. What was hidden there, beyond the rotten wooden doors? He pushed them open, the rusty hinges creaking like a ghostly warning. Inside, a sight jolted him, an emaciated horse, tied up and abandoned. Desperation mirrored in its eyes, sent a bolt of responsibility through him. Wasn't that what his family always stood for? Protecting the lost, lending their hands to the helpless? But could he afford to take care of himself, let alone another living being? Digging into his dwindling savings, Jake felt the fresh sting of hopelessness pinch at his heart, leaving only $75 in his pocket. And yet, that horse needed him. Swallowing hard, he resolved to harness the remnants of his will, grabbing supplies for hay, medicine, and feed. If he could bring this creature back to health, perhaps he could revitalize the ranch too. The parallel raced through his mind. Was he saving the horse, or saving himself? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications, so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. His journey began with a spark of hope as he documented it online, the community's response igniting something in him he hadn't felt in years. Just as he found his footing, a powerful developer swooped in, brandishing promises of financial gain through housing projects that could wipe out not just his ranch, but everything he cherished in this small town. Panic surged. Was he destined to surrender his family's legacy for mere security? A town hall meeting loomed, and with it, the pressures mounted. Should he confront the developer head-on, or would fear tether him to inaction? As he rehearsed, shadows of self-doubt cast long across his heart. How much could he risk? Would it all be for nothing? A ghost of a man chasing echoes? The clock ticked ominously, each second drawing him closer to the moment that could determine not just his fate, but the very essence of what family meant to him. Would he stand up for what truly mattered, or let the chains of financial dread shackle him to despair? The weight of every choice sat heavy on his shoulder, leaving him wrestling with the relentless anguish of what would come next. Jake leaned against the barn door, his heart thundering in his chest as the weight of the upcoming town hall meeting loomed over him like a storm cloud. The sun was beginning to set, casting an orange hue over the fields that now seemed to shiver in anticipation of his decision. Each breath he took felt deliberate, a reminder of how much was at stake. Everyone in the community would be watching, friends, neighbors, and even those who simply basked in the entertainment of a heated debate. But for Jake, this was a turning point. It was more than just a confrontation. It was about salvaging the heart of his family's legacy. He stepped back inside the barn, the musty scent of hay and wood wrapping around him like a familiar embrace. There was something profoundly comforting about the creature he had saved, a small flicker of resilience in its dull eyes that mirrored his own struggle. Every moment spent nursing the horse, every fragment of joy and pain experienced with it, transformed his outlook. It was more than just a connection. It was an awakening. With a newfound determination, Jake began to formulate a plan. He took a notepad and started jotting down key points for his speech. What would he say to the townsfolk? How could he convey the significance of preserving the ranch, not just for himself, but for the community's heritage? He poured his heart out on the pages, illustrating the mission to reclaim his ranch as a sanctuary, not just for him, but for those like his horse who had lost everything. As the words flowed, he felt the pulse of determination coursing through his fingers. His thoughts crystallized. He could present the horse as a symbol of resilience, a representation of the ranch's potential to be revitalized. Maybe it could evolve into a rehabilitative space, a place that fostered healing for both people and animals. But then doubt crept in again. Who would listen to him? Who would believe that a failed ranch could morph into a beacon of hope? He wrestled with the question, the nagging fear squeezing tighter around his heart. He flicked through social media posts from his documentation of the horse's recovery. Hundreds had rallied to support him, to see transformation, and in that moment, he realized. It wasn't just about a ranch, it was about community. He was part of something bigger, and that spark of hope fueled his courage. As the evening shadows merged with the night, he scanned the fields, each blade of grass symbolizing a story, a legacy. This was not a solitary fight. It was a fight for every family that had ever found solace on this land. But would those thoughts stand strong against the developer's promises of wealth and progress? As much as it terrified him, Jake sensed that to confront the developer meant risking everything he had left. The hour before the meeting slipped away, and he stood in front of the mirror, rehearsing. Each phrase rang out with clarity, but hesitation beckoned him, questioning his resolve. Would he waver when it mattered most? The time for excuses had passed. He needed to face his fears not just for himself, but for the horse, and for every story connected to that ranch. He closed his eyes, imagining the horse nodding its head at him as if urging him on. Just then, a surge of determination crystallized within. It was time to not only reclaim his voice, but to ensure that the love and history embedded in that land endured for generations. As he stepped out of the barn, ready to face the community, he took a deep breath, grounding himself in the moment. The truth was, he wasn't merely fighting for survival. He was fighting to reclaim purpose. But little did he know, the developer had a few tricks up his sleeve that he had yet to unveil. How far would Jake have to go to protect everything he held dear? The fluorescent lights flickered above him as Jake entered the town hall, a stark contrast to the comforting darkness of the barn he had just left. The room buzzed with energy, townspeople milling about, their chatter circling around him like an unrelenting tide. Each step felt heavier, as though he were wading through an ocean of expectations and judgments. How could he convey the depth of his passion amidst this sea of faces? He caught sight of familiar faces, friends who had supported him in whispers and nods, eager for his moment to shine. But nestled amongst them were skeptics, their eyes scrutinizing, eager to catch any hint of weakness. The anxiety rumbled in his stomach, but it was tinged with a strange excitement. Jake breathed deeply, trying to steady himself. His heart raced, and he knew hesitation could consume him. This wasn't merely about a speech, it was about forging his identity anew. Stepping toward the podium, he felt the weight of those before him, the legacy of family ranchers merging with his own personal history. As he adjusted the microphone, he could feel every gaze lock onto him, each expression a potential dagger or a soothing balm. He began speaking. Each word was deliberate, carefully crafted from the notes he had jotted down. His voice wavered slightly, but a fierce determination settled within him as he shared his vision of the ranch's revival. I understand that some of you see promises the developer has made as easier, more profitable choices, he asserted, eyes narrowing toward the crowd. But what if we could take those broken places and build something that actually means something? This ranch could be a healing space, the kind of sanctuary for animals and humans alike that restores hope and makes us whole. He could see the shift in the room as he spoke, people nodding slowly, the rhythm of his words like a heartbeat. But doubt began creeping back in, gnawing at him. What made this dream different from any lofty ambition that crumbled beneath skepticism? In the back of his mind, the developer's gilded promises echoed, tempting a community starved for revitalization. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed the developer seated at the back, his presence an unsettling anchor in the room. A sly grin played on his lips. It was the kind of smile that hinted at insidious tactics and unspoken threats. The moment Jake had prepared for had arrived, the time for confrontation. Growth isn't about tearing down what we have, he pressed on, feeling a surge of courage. It's about building our legacy, strengthening our ties, and nurturing our land. If we don't stand up and fight for what truly matters, what do we leave to the next generation? He could see the spark of recognition ignite in the faces around him, a collective realization that perhaps they were all part of something richer than they had thought. Each gasp of understanding filled the air, pushing him closer to a boiling point of confidence. But just as hope began to swell within him, the developer rose, a pivot in the air that sent a wave of tension surging through the crowd. His voice rang out, smooth and calculated. While vision is admirable, it's folly without the means to execute it. This town deserves a future that isn't shackled by nostalgia. Jake's heart sank. The game had shifted, and with it, the stakes climbed. How could he counter this narrative that was dripping with dismissiveness? The familiar fear overwhelmed him, but deep down, he sensed a glimmer of strength in his vulnerability. The unease simmered beneath his skin as he stood there, staring into the eyes of every single person in the room, feeling the weight of their trust and their doubt. How far was he willing to go? As he took a step back, ready to regroup his thoughts, he realized this was more than just a speech. It was a defining moment. Would he stand his ground, or allow the tide to wash away his aspirations? The outcomes were uncertain, but one thing was clear. He would have to confront the full force of this opposition, if he wanted even a chance to protect the legacy he cherished. With the room hanging in palpable tension, Jake focused on gathering himself, preparing to deliver the punch that would seal his fate. The moment had arrived for a decisive challenge, and he knew he could no longer back down. What did that mean for the truth he had worked so hard to uncover? His pulse quickened as he faced the crowd, the developer's scoff echoing in his mind. This was it. He needed clarity and resolve. The doubts and skepticism swirling around him morphed into a distinct challenge. Rather than retreating from the confrontation, he could choose to meet it head-on, each heartbeat amplifying his newly found determination. "Folks, each one of us understands the stark reality we're facing," he started again, his voice steadied by purpose. "Life has thrown challenges at us, and I won't deny that we're at a crossroads. But which path we choose now will shape our future and define our legacy." He caught the gaze of his closest ally, Madison, her encouraging nod reigniting the fire within him. The air was thick with expectation, yet in that suffocating moment, he clawed through to a place of fierce clarity. His voice could be a tool that could either encourage resilience or succumb to fear. "Too often," Jake continued, "we become entrapped by what's in front of us. Money, ambition from outside forces. We've built our lives here, whether on the land or through our connections. Do we want to give that up for something shiny, but ultimately empty? We've seen it too many times before. He shifted his weight, feeling the uneven floor beneath him, grounding himself as metaphorical as it was literal. The skepticism on the developer's face flared, but Jake pressed on, undeterred. Here was where he would enact change, not through flowery words, but anchored truth. What makes this ranch different from those empty lots you see around town is its soul. His voice rose, each syllable charged with conviction. This place has served our families, providing food, shelter, and memories that carry through generations. It's not just land, it's us. A ripple of recognition flickered through the crowd, as if he had rekindled an ember long extinguished. Empowerment surged through his veins. Strength, vulnerability, and community all bound together in one moment. The memories of laughter under the stars, of children petting horses, and neighbors coming together to care for one another poured forth. Jake seized that wave. What if we pooled our resources? What if we started small but whole? He proposed, connecting with their shared experiences. We could begin with a modest fund. A mere $75 every month from each household to bring life back here. The numbers danced in the air, transforming from indecision into possibility. The developer staggered visibly, momentarily losing his composure. For Jake, it was an opening, a chance to create a dialogue rather than a duel. His vision became crystal clear. This was not just about the ranch, it was about them, about standing up against the tide of dismissiveness and reclaiming their narrative. Together, we can cultivate this land back into a sanctuary for our families, a home for those who have nowhere to go. We can uphold our values, cultivating a healing space, rather than succumbing to empty promises, he asserted, his fervor contagious. With every word, he noticed more heads nodding fiercely. Apprehension soon morphed into camaraderie. There was electricity in the air, the crackle of potential awakening, as Jake summoned the whisper of courage that had been burrowed deep in his heart. But the developer regained his footing, a glint of challenge returned to his steely gaze. Jake sensed the looming storm, a counter-offensive brewing in the corner of the room. The stakes had escalated. The community's weight now pressed heaviness against him. But he couldn't relent. Jake took a breath, grounded in his rising confidence. He was not just standing for himself anymore, but for all of them. The stream of doubt that once encroached the edges of his confidence had now transformed into a roaring river of tenacity. The developer leaned forward, ready to counter. A war of words loomed large, but Jake steeled himself. Was it boldness or desperation driving him forward? He could feel the crossroads shifting again beneath him. As the developer's voice sliced through the air, Jake wondered, was he ready to confront this looming threat? It was a confrontation that could define him, for better or worse. The moment had arrived, not just to defend an idea, but to reveal the strength of his resolve. What would be the cost of pursuing authenticity in a landscape tainted by greed? The answer would soon unfold. The developer's voice was cold and calculated. You think a few $100s a month will revive this place? This ranch is nothing but a relic. What you're proposing is just a fantasy. The dismissive ridicule coiled around Jake's resolve, but he drew strength from the crowd's energy. It was a moment of clarity. The developer wasn't merely an opponent. He was a catalyst for realization. In Jake's heart, the dream he envisioned for the ranch wasn't resting on the fragile hopes of his neighbors, but on the raw potential rooted deep within their shared history. Fantasy or not, Jake replied, his voice firm. This land was built on our stories, our losses and triumphs. Instead of dismissing it, why not channel that into something real? My idea starts with the belief that together we have the power to change our trajectory. He watched the audience. Some faces were skeptical, but others began to lean forward. The shift was palpable. Each nod he witnessed fueled him further. It wasn't just the proposal that mattered, it was his readiness to challenge the notion of futility. Just like the ranch, he too needed rebirth, a transition from doubt to unwavering clarity. The developer smirked, pushing forward with a tone that dripped with condescension. Let me ask you this. If you believe so fervently, why have your neighbors not rallied behind you fully? Why the hesitation? Jake's heart raced. The unspoken question lingered, echoing the buried doubts from his past. Were they actually united? Were they not as dedicated as he assumed? In that moment of introspection, he caught Madison's unwavering gaze. Her conviction reminded him that change often sparked from uncomfortable questions and hard truths. Maybe they're waiting for someone to lead, Jake countered, his voice rising as he focused on the crowd. Waiting for someone to articulate the promise of revival. I refuse to let sway or fear define our next chapter. Can you say the same for your empty lots? The developer's confident facade faltered, yet Jake saw it. The uncertainty behind those eyes, the chink in his armor. Here it wasn't just a discussion about money. It was about pride, about identity, about their future. This time, he pivoted the conversation. Instead of belittling what we hope for, let's explore it. Each of you has something to contribute, skills, hands willing to work. Imagine a space where we nurture not just the land, but our collective spirit. He could feel the current within the room change again, lifting the atmosphere from one of confrontation to one of coexistence. People glanced at one another. A spark ignited. He began to conjure visions. Workshops for families, a sanctuary for at-risk animals, a communal orchard. Each idea took on weight, each thought threading them closer to an authentic vision. A soft mumble began to circulate. Ideas bounced from neighbor to neighbor. Jake recognized the anonymity of fear dissolving, making way for optimism. Yes, doubts lingered, but now they held conversations instead of silence. And he realized, didn't the very act of speaking up reshape his potential? What Jake hadn't anticipated was a more profound awakening occurring within himself. As he took in his surroundings, the growing energy surged through him, creating a humorous irony. He had come to inspire others, yet found inspiration in their willingness to see the possibility. Under the heat of scrutiny, under the weight of expectation, Jake could feel a new layer of resolve crystallizing within. This wasn't merely about saving the ranch, it was about resurrecting hope, crafting courage, and embracing authenticity. But as the developer gathered himself for retaliation, a new storm brewed. Jake's heart raced with uncertainty. Was this truly going to stabilize not only his confidence, but also ignite the community's commitment? He steadied himself, ready for the counter-offensive, recognizing that each moment shared in this dialogue was forging a new identity for him. What would happen next, as those powerful truths mingled with palpable tension? Jake stood in the dim light, feeling the weight of his words still hanging in the air. The developer shifted, annoyance etched into his features, but Jake's focus was no longer on him. Instead, his mind swirled with the conversations ignited among the audience. This was more than a mere debate. It felt like the start of a movement. But could he sustain this momentum? Thoughts flickered through his mind, each more daunting than the last. Crowds could swell or disperse in an instant. What if the ideas he had championed collapsed under scrutiny? What if the community's simmering doubts rose to the surface, drowning his intentions? He leaned against the podium, breathing deep. This was a crucial juncture, a moment demanding commitment, both from himself and the people around him. The questions the developer had posed echoed again. If he believed in the potential for change, so must they. And therein lay the crux of his internal struggle: belief. Did he possess the tenacity to stand against the tide of skepticism that had long plagued both him and his neighbors? Madison approached. "Jake, that was incredible," she whispered, urgency tinging her voice. "But we can't stop here. You stirred something tonight. We have to keep that energy alive." She was right. He felt an instinctual pull towards something greater than himself. He needed to build on this connection, to channel whatever spark had been ignited. "I need to take action now," he replied, glancing around while his pulse quickened. "We must gather again. Actually, engage with everyone. I can't do this alone." Madison nodded. "Good idea. Let's organize a meeting, something less formal. Just a space where everyone can share their thoughts. Ideally this week." At the thought of organizing another discussion, anxiety crept back. But exhilaration pushed it aside. He had spoken once in front of the crowd. Now, he must embrace the prospect of fostering deeper relationships with each individual. Building a network grounded in shared purpose was a daunting task, demanding patience, understanding, and a willingness to navigate discomfort. That weekend, he determined to open his home to a gathering. But first, he felt the need to know his neighbors better. He needed their stories, their fears, their dreams. Those elements would bind his vision into a tapestry of collective ambition. He stepped outside, taking note of the fading light and softening hues of dusk. Walking through the neighborhood, he mentally mapped out possible conversations, each door a potential narrative. Then at Jim's home, a retired vet whose passion for animals was rivaled only by his penchant for bourbon, Jake paused. Jim offered an endless trove of stories about the land's past. Perhaps even more invaluable were his insights into the community's sentiment. Sometimes, they want to love this place, but they fear it'll let them down. Jim shared over his half-empty glass, concern etching into his brow. You have to show them that hope isn't just a word. It's an action. Action, Jake repeated quietly. This crystallization of thought echoed a mantra he didn't know yet he needed. He'd relinquished the idea that his vision was solely his own. It transformed into a shared responsibility, intertwined with emotions and vulnerability. As he headed home, a profound realization struck him. To revive the ranch was not merely an elaborate plan rooted in nostalgia, but an opportunity to guide others through their individual struggles. It outlined the path to personal authenticity, the ongoing challenge that loomed before him. But there was a reality he had yet to confront. The real barriers were not just physical ones, but the deeply ingrained fears within his neighbors. Each story he uncovered could serve as a bridge or a chasm. With this newfound understanding galvanizing his spirit, Jake slowed his steps. He stood at a crossroads. The next meeting wouldn't just demand ideas, but would require him to engage with their narratives in profound ways. What awaited him in those houses? Tangled stories reflecting fears he couldn't yet fathom. He felt the pulsing urgency of untold conclusions echo in the silence. The real work was only just beginning, and somewhere tangible transformations loomed in the hazy distance. Jake moved onward, determined and wary, ready to face the challenges hidden within fragile hearts, setting in motion a journey he'd never anticipated, grounded in individual stories, yet leading toward a collective awakening. Would he embrace the uncomfortable truths, or crumble under the weight of them? Jake's house felt too quiet as he prepared for the gathering. The silence almost mocked him, amplifying the doubts swirling in his mind. Could he really connect with his neighbors on a personal level? Each ticking second on the clock weighed heavily, a reminder of the emotional hurdles each individual carried. He acknowledged that these conversations would not just scrape the surface. They would dive straight into the marrow of their fears, desires, and disappointments, turning his modest living room into a confessional for souls yearning for change. He busied himself in the kitchen, arranging snacks that represented warmth. A tray of fresh cookies, bowls of cut fruit, and a steaming pot of coffee that would flow like lifeblood through the conversations. He needed the atmosphere to encourage openness, a safe haven where vulnerability could be welcomed rather than shunned. But as he poured coffee, he couldn't shake off the gnawing apprehension that resided deep within him. What if he could not provide that safe space? What if the realities of his neighbors' lives were too complex, too painful, for discussions to emerge organically? The doorbell rang, shattering the silence, and his heart raced. He opened the door to find Madison standing there, her smile infectious and reassuring. "Hey, I brought a few things. Thought it might help set the mood," she said, stepping inside with a box filled with candles. "Perfect. Thanks, Madison. I really want this to work," Jake replied, his voice steady but laced with a hint of vulnerability that he hoped she wouldn't notice. As guests started trickling in, Jake felt the collective energy in the room shift. Conversations sparked and flared around him, and he watched, absorbing snippets of laughter and the easing of tension. Each shared story was a thread, weaving an intricate tapestry stretching beyond his initial vision. People began to share their apprehensions about the community, the ranch, and their collective lives. For every laughter that echoed, he felt the weight of another hidden narrative. He spotted Jim across the room, leaning against the wall and observing the interactions. Jake approached him, grateful for the familiar presence amid this whirlwind. "What do you think?" he asked, hoping for some validation. "It's a good start," Jim replied, his eyes scanning the crowd. "But remember, you may not get them talking tonight. People are hesitant, scared to lay down their truths. It takes time." Time. The word lingered in Jake's mind, echoing the theme of patience and gradual progress. But as the night unfolded, hidden truths began to emerge amidst the small talk. A neighbor shared their battle with unemployment. Another spoke of fears stemming from past failures in the community. And fragments of dreams were laid bare, clashing with the everyday frustrations of small-town life. Every revelation chipped away at Jake's internal barriers. He felt himself being drawn deeper into the lives of those he had perceived as inconspicuous players in a larger narrative. They were not just participants in his vision, they were the heart of it. He realized that embracing their vulnerabilities meant relinquishing part of his control, allowing a collaborative approach to emerge. As conversations grew more intense and passionate, one resident's emotional breakdown caught Jake off guard. Tears streamed down her face as she articulated the weight of neglect she felt from those who should have supported her. Faces turned toward her, some ice-cold, others sympathetic. As she drowned in her sorrow, Jake felt the pressure of his own fears encroaching. Was he equipped to help her? Would he be able to bridge the chasm of despair that threatened to engulf her? "Let's take a break," he finally proposed, his voice steadying as he turned the room's attention from pain to something he hoped would uplift, sharing their visions for the ranch and community. But as he spoke, the reality of unprocessed trauma loomed over them. He had expected a simple sharing of thoughts and aspirations, not a revealing of depths that rattled him. Jake realized he stood not just at the helm of a community gathering, but on the precipice of something far deeper. Could he truly maneuver this fragile space without losing himself in the process? In that defining moment, doubt deepened, but a flicker of commitment ignited within him. The upcoming weeks would not only test his resolve, but would reshape not just the ranch's fate, but the intimate truths of the lives surrounding it. There was no turning back. Would he rise to the challenge, or would he unwittingly unleash deeper fears and wounds that could tear apart the fragile fabric he hoped to weave? Jake stood by the window, the remnants of conversation fading from his home. The flickering candlelight danced to the retreating echoes of laughter and whispered struggles. Yet even surrounded by his neighbors, he felt an unsettling solitude, as though the weight of their shared vulnerabilities rested solely on his shoulders. The night had illuminated paths he hadn't anticipated, and the weight of responsibility pressed heavily against his chest. He replayed the evening in his mind, the story of the woman who had cried, her painful truths exposing an intricate web of neglect and longing for connection. The sharp contrast between the smiles and the sorrow shifted his perception of community. He was no longer merely a mediator in discussions, he was emerging as a potential leader, someone who could ignite real change. But could he bear the emotional toll that came with such accountability? As dawn crept in, painting the sky with hues of optimism, Jake felt an unexpected surge of determination brewing within him. It was clear that immersion into the lives of his neighbors was not a passive option. He needed to engage with their stories actively. The ranch was no longer just a property to manage. It had become a metaphor for their collective struggles, a lifeline they could nourish alongside each other. Jake scribbled hastily into a notebook, documenting thoughts that flared brightly in the wake of the gathering. His prior methods of leadership were too far removed. To guide the ranch effectively, he had to dive deeper into the emotional landscapes of those involved. He must utilize empathy, balancing hope and vulnerability like art. Each page folded under the weight of his ambition, punctuated with the realization that understanding was the first step towards healing. Yet, confronting his own feelings was a necessary detour. The lingering doubts of his aptitude clawed at him. Was he genuinely capable of leading others out of their despair? Would his efforts be enough? Seeking clarity, he resolved to channel his uncertainty into action by scheduling one-on-one check-ins with individuals affected by the collective trauma they shared. He registered the names of those who had opened up, feeling a pull toward their stories. One by one, he thought about how each encounter would require delicate handling and skilled communication. The emotional recalibration wouldn't just impact them. He could sense it already altering his self-perception. Connecting beyond the superficial would shape him into a more understanding person, despite the unease inkling at the back of his mind. Days passed, and as appointments filled his calendar, building anticipation became almost contagious. Each individual brought with them layers of complexity, presenting a unique opportunity for engagement. An old farmer weighed down by the harshness of change in the environment, a young couple caught in the throes of unforeseen employment challenges, a forgotten elder longing for belonging. They awaited him, and he, too, awaited them. Yet as the meetings unfolded, Jake discovered fragments of his past, resurfacing. He confronted the moments where he felt vulnerable and overlooked. Could he approach these gatherings with the right balance of openness, a willingness to share yet a reserve, not to overshadow their struggles? A personal moral dilemma hung over him. How much of his own history could he reveal without detracting from their tales of need? It was clear that he was undergoing a transformation, layering new skills over old insecurities. Jake silently vowed to reshape his narrative, crafting it alongside others rather than independently. However, the apprehension lingered. What if his vulnerability backfired? As he sat across from his first appointment, he found himself musing about how to share without drowning out their voices. He needed boundaries, both for himself and for them. A precarious balancing act that could easily tip. The next meeting would be with the woman who had broken down at the gathering. Would their conversation veer towards her recovery, or would his attempts stoke the fires of her pain once more? Beneath these questions lay a deeper truth. Vulnerability was not just theirs to share. It would be his too. How would he navigate this intertwining of souls? Would he find solace in shared vulnerabilities, or would they expose him to deeper fears than he had anticipated? Jake approached the appointed day with a mixture of excitement and dread. The sun hung low, casting long shadows across the ranch, mirroring his internal struggle. The previous night had left him restless, replaying the moments where he would engage with the woman who had revealed so much of her raw emotion. Now, he sat, anxiously tapping his foot, awaiting her arrival. She stepped through the door, visibly nervous. Yet the moment their eyes met, a familiar bond sparked, one of uncertain understanding and shared humanity. "Thank you for meeting with me," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. The dialogue began cautiously, with him addressing her pain and encouraging her to express her feelings. Jake saw the flickering light of hope within her eyes as she recounted her experiences, each word steeped in sorrow, yet infused with the yearning for healing. As the conversation unfolded, he leaned in, letting her steer the narrative, carefully ensuring that his own stories remained secondary. But her struggles echoed within him, prompting flashes of his past, the vulnerability he had tried to bury beneath layers of practicality. He had always been the strong one, the dependable figure in attempts to carry others' burdens. Yet, as he witnessed her tears and heard her laughter through the melancholy, a realization struck him. Offering strength was one thing, but embracing vulnerability alongside another was a different beast altogether. This was not just about listening. It was about conspiring with the narrative, a shared journey through the shackles of pain toward liberation. After the meeting ended, Jake sank onto the porch steps. He was flooded with a tumult of conflicting emotions, solace mingled with a newfound awareness of his own fragility. He realized that sharing would not detract from their stories. Rather, it could enhance them. Violent waves of doubt crashed against his resolve. How would he wield this honesty without losing the gravity of their struggles? In the days that followed, he met with the other residents, each meeting stripping away more layers of his own defensiveness. The farmer spoke of his struggles with climate change, and during this discussion, Jake felt the prick of helplessness again. He found himself questioning his own drive. Could he offer tangible support? Would his empathy translate into practical help? The couple discussed their battles with financial insecurity. Jake listened intently, drawn into their plight. The tender sharing of their burdens became a pivotal moment, exposing his abilities to connect with their reality and reflect upon his own challenges. Each encounter unfolded threads of his old self, coaxing him to navigate the boundaries of strength and vulnerability. However, it was during an awkward moment of silence with the forgotten elder, who expressed raw loneliness, that Jake learned the most rattling lesson. He hesitated, deeply aware that his previous methods of patting the back were insufficient for someone drowning in isolation. Instead, he simply sat in the silence with the elder, sharing the weight of the air, allowing them both to feel the magnitude of their existence together. This muted exchange ignited something potent within him, yet anguish echoed as he contemplated the implications of these newfound insights. Was he brave enough to be seen, to unfurl his insecurities openly as he encouraged others to seek light amid darkness? That night, the ranch felt less like a burden and more like a sanctuary for growth, a haven forged from shared vulnerabilities. Recognizing that change could begin here, within these walls, promised him more than just purpose. It offered him the possibility of true connection. But just as hope began to bloom, Jake received an unexpected message from the woman. "I need to talk. It's urgent." A knot formed in his stomach. What now? What could shatter the fragile tranquility he had started to build? The weight of foreboding loomed large. The next step would lead Jake into an uncharted territory of truths he might not be prepared to face. What awaited him on the other side of the door? Jake paced back and forth in the confines of his modest living room, a whirlwind of anxiety and determination churning within him. The message from the woman, Lila, had forced him to confront the gravity of the situation that loomed ahead. He had embarked on this journey of revival for his ranch, but the intensity of the emotional connectivity he fostered through their meetings was veering toward an unexpected precipice. The knot in his stomach tightened as he replayed the words in his mind, wondering what urgent matter compelled Lila to reach out. He took a moment to breathe deeply. Whatever it was, he reminded himself, it was part of the journey. This path he had chosen to undertake, for both his own salvation and the revitalization of the connections woven throughout their small community. Lila arrived shortly after, her expression a mixture of fervor and trepidation. Jake felt a rush of empathy as she settled across from him. He was now acutely aware of her silent struggle, the weight that pressed down heavily on her shoulders, a weight he had become familiar with through the narratives of so many who sat at this very table before her. "Jake, this is hard for me to say," Lila began slowly, her hands fidgeting with a corner of her shirt as though seeking comfort from its fabric. "The truth is, I'm scared. Scared of losing the ranch, scared of losing myself in the process. I thought I was ready to move forward, but something within me keeps pulling me back." In that moment, Jake recognized her vulnerability. It mirrored his own doubts. Strangely, this resonated truth between them felt like a shared heartbeat, a reminder that they were both still on a journey, both in need of hope. "I understand more than you realize, Lila. It feels overwhelming sometimes, and that's okay," he replied, his voice steady as he offered her reassurance. "You're not alone in this. We're all in this together." As they exchanged words, Jake realized how far he had come. Just weeks prior, he had been a man bound by uncertainty, paralyzed by doubt. Today, he sat with a firm sense of purpose and commitment rooted in empathy and authenticity. He was not merely a voice leading an initiative. He had become an active participant in the healing process, not just for himself, but for a community. "I want to help, really help," Jake said, leaning forward. "This ranch needs to be a place where we stand together, shoulder to shoulder, no matter the challenges we face. Let's revisit our idea of the sanctuary. It should nurture our healing as much as it does the land." Lila nodded slowly, understanding dawning her expression. Jake could see the shift, the flicker of hope ignited by the realization that their strength wouldn't stem from financial promises or empty endeavors, but from the resolve of a community willing to stand up for one another. As their conversation deepened, Jake recognized the synergy building. Together, they proposed a grassroots fundraising plan, something grassroots that allowed everyone to contribute, no matter how small their means. It was tethered in the belief that change could come from communal action. Lila's fears unraveled bit by bit, replaced by a growing sense of possibility, bolstered by the shared commitment they both felt. Jake embraced the meeting with Lila as a turning point. Their resolve crystallized into actionable steps. They would call upon their neighbors again, this time not just to voice their needs, but to collectively draft a vision that could resonate throughout the community. After all, it was not just about saving the ranch, it was about ensuring that every individual felt seen, heard, and valued in the process. In the subsequent days, they rallied their neighbors, bearing witness to a transformative effect. What had once felt like fragmented conversations morphed into collaborative brainstorming sessions rich with enthusiasm, camaraderie, and revived spirits. Each gathering shifted perceptions, building a palpable acknowledgement that they were more than individuals aiming to save a piece of land. They were a community revitalizing their shared legacy. Jake had not only recognized his own growth, but had become a catalyst for the emotional resurgence that flowed like a river through their collective stories. His once dissonant fears were now harmonized with purpose, embodying the strength he had glimpsed in others. Each interaction lit a path forward, creating an enduring legacy of compassion, tenacity, and authentic connection. As they drew closer to their goal, one thing became clear to Jake. Through the trials of fear and vulnerability, he had not just preserved the ranch, he had cultivated a lifeline back to himself. Solidly positioned within this community, He felt an undeniable sense of achievement. He knew, without a doubt, that they would prosper together and uplift one another. This was the completion of his personal transformation, from a man on the brink of losing it all to a leader ignited by love for the land and a deep commitment to communal healing. With Lila by his side, a clearer roadmap unfolded, directing them toward collaborative success. More than symbolic, the sanctuary became a testament to their collective struggles. Themes of resilience, hope, and authenticity had redefined their community narrative, culminating in a powerful declaration. This was their epoch of reclamation. In the silence that followed, Jake felt a profound sense of fulfillment, a resonant piece of peace blossoming within him, rooting him firmly in his reclaimed identity. He had achieved something far greater than he set out to do. He had conquered his own doubts, opening the door to mutual empowerment. Jake leaned back in his chair, looking out over the ranch fields as they shimmered in the golden light of dawn. With each passing day, he savored the richness of life unfolding not only for him, but for those connected to him. They were living out the story of resilience, transforming fears into fuel for the future, a legacy no longer built on broken promises, but on the true essence of humanity. Reflect upon this journey, dear friends. Have you ever found yourself at the crossroads of fear and courage? Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that resonate deeply within. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help others discover these journeys of transformation. Comment your reactions and theories about Jake's journey and the powerful changes that lie ahead. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to absorb this conclusion about overcoming fears and embracing vulnerability. This is the moment to stand with true fans of personal overcoming stories and show your unwavering support. Don't wait even one more second.